Capcom Cup 2025, they finally announced the CPT format, which is kind of weird. They didn't do any formal announcements during Capcom Cup about this, and they slowly started trickling out the details about the actual format. But over the course of the couple days, we got the full picture now for what they're doing. So they already announced that there's going to be 8 offline tournament systems, or tournaments in general, but now they announced the point system. So there is going to be a return to some level of a tour for the Capcom Pro Tour. I am mostly happy about it. I'm mostly happy about it. Not everything is always all good or all bad. There's shades of gray here for sure. But I know I have a reputation for being the guy who hates World Warrior, which is not true. I'm definitely not the person who hates World Warrior. Okay, I want to be clear about that. There's more nuance to the takes. But I do think we need some level of point system to reward consistency and some carrot to encourage people to actually travel to tournaments. And I think they've developed the carrot. We have the carrot here. Introducing the Premier Point System. Points will be awarded to players who finish 2nd to 25th in each Premier tournament. The top 6 players with the highest points after all 8 Premier tournaments will earn a spot to compete in Capcom Cup 12. The first place player from each Premier event will secure the spot in Capcom Cup 12. Get ready for the 2025 season and stay tuned. So they gave the details. They're doing a combination of auto qualifiers and a point system. Because there's only 8 offline events, that kind of makes sense, which means that 8 plus 6, what's 14 players coming from offline. I think Capcom Cup 11 this year was amazing, even though I think the majority of the players who went the furthest were from World Warrior program. I think a big part of why it was so good was, on top of a lot of factors, the players coming in really practiced, it being hosted in Japan, amazing venue, amazing production. I also think having 10 offline players gave more stakes to the group stages. I don't think that can be understated. Like the fact that there was big known names coming in from the offline qualifiers, even though I think only half of them made it through to top 16, that gave context to the wins that the players had, because there was big names that won through offline tournaments that we got to see work to get to that position, and very public and publicly viewed speculations, spectacles of skill. I think that is super important to have. Otherwise, you can end up in a situation where, to a global audience, you have many players with no known history fighting each other, and you don't understand, based on just the gameplay alone, like what their level is. You have to have that sort of context. So I think that's important. Like, we have to have that to some degree. That's not to say that the players who come through World Warrior are not as skilled as the ones from offline. We've already saw that was not true. But I think you need some level of some level of offline view tournaments. Now, the problem is, of course, the where do these spots come from? You have to make them come from somewhere else. You have to take them from the World Warrior program, because it's still going to be 48 players. So that is one of the downsides of this change here. Fewer amount of World Warrior spots to accommodate for this. And on top of that, the distribution of the events, I'll get into. There's definitely problems with the distribution of the 8 events here. But they finally have the announcement of the Capcom Pro Tour website going up. And if you get to it, they have the total breakdown of how the qualification will actually work this season. So if you go to the website, they have the 14 players coming from the Premiers, 28 players from World Warrior, and 6 players from these offline qualifications: Capcom Cup 11, Street Fighter League World Championship, and Esports World Cup. Now, I think it's kind of weird, some of these, to be honest. I don't know how I feel about Street Fighter League being a qualification into Capcom Cup, to be quite honest. And I still have questions about the Street Fighter League format in general. I don't really understand how I feel about this. Oh, tournament? There always has to be, what was it for Evo? Champion? There always has to be a typo somewhere. Having the fact that there was more offline qualifiers and auto qualifiers through the other events, we went from 10 offline and 38 World Warrior to 14 offline, 6 from these auto qualifiers, and 28 from World Warrior. So World Warrior was nerfed, and the way they did that is they kept all of the current regions for World Warrior, but they reduced the number of super regions. And super regions were the regions where you had 2 qualifiers out for the World Warrior. So you would have in the super region, they added the consistent point qualifier. So the player with the most number of points at the end of the 5 tournaments would auto-qualify to Capcom Cup. And then the other 8 players below that in the rankings would play in the regional finals for that tournament. And then they would, the winner of that tournament, that regional final, would then go on to qualify for Capcom Cup instead. So because of that, that gave it was kind of bias baked in. Like they had to decide who was a super region, who wasn't. They decided to cut that down. And it's a little strange how they cut that down as well. So if we get into it, Incross here has a good breakdown about how the point distribution works. So second is 300, and we trickle down by 50 each tier here until you get to 9th place, 13th, 30, 17th, 20, 25th, 10. Only 6 people qualifying via offline. So I would imagine you're probably still going to have some pretty top-heavy placements if you want to have a chance to make it in. The other thing is the regions that they made super regions. UK, Ireland, Japan, Asia, and Asia East. And Asia is just China. To me, Japan, China, Asia East, I'm kind of on board with you. UK and Ireland, that is random as hell. Of all the places to keep the super region, that one strikes me as the most out of place. If you had to pick one, I would definitely pick US East. If I had to add one more besides Japan, China, and Asia East, I guess US East would be the only one I could think of. Obviously, that's not to say that other places don't have a lot of, super talented players that could fill that spot in, but UK and Ireland seems out of left field. France, so here's the other factor when considering this. The tournament spread is really kind of bad geographically in terms of accessibilities. The events, I think, are all amazing events. Evo France has never existed before, but Evo Japan, Combo Breaker, CEO, Blink Respawn, Evo, and UFA are all amazing tournaments in terms of scale, prestige, production, what they offer for the community. These are all amazing events deserving of premier status. However, if you look at the distribution and location, we got 3 in USA in Combo Breaker, CEO, and Evo. And then we have 1 in Japan with Evo Japan. CPT 2025 Premier Asia, I think, is going to China, is what I heard. And then we have 2 in France and then 1 in DR. So in terms of distribution geographically, it's 3 USA, 2 Asia, and then 2 France. So giving France a super region on top of that also is like, well, they already have 2 premiers in their backyard and they're not hurting for accessibility. And you could argue the same thing for US East. So missing here is, I think this is bad for Capcom's PR themselves. Blaz just went on that legendary run, getting second, qualifying out of Chile and South America East. South America East lost their super region, right? It's really bad PR for Capcom. They had this planned months in advance. It's not like they saw Capcom Cup results and then planned this. This has been planned for a very long time, obviously. It's fuel to the fire of like, hey, you just took away spots from these regions, and a lot of players in those regions can't afford to get the tournaments. Now, they still have World Warrior. They will still be able to send a qualifier. So it's not like they've been cut off, but then also there's discussions about how North Africa still doesn't have a qualification spot. I love the tour system. And I wish they would have added an event in South America at minimum. Brazil or Chile, I think, could definitely host a premiere. So that's something that I hope they work towards. I'm not saying to cut off the offline tour. I feel like some people act like having an offline tour is blasphemous because it's going to be inherently biased towards certain regions. That is always going to be a reality. They need to work to improve it. But we need an offline tour. We absolutely need something. I think this is a position that I want to clarify about my own priorities. I am very motivated to promote a meritocracy where the best players on the planet are able to compete and earn their spots in the Capcom Cup. In an ideal world for me, I would love if Capcom Cup had the best 48 players on the planet, period. I don't care where they're from. I don't care their upbringing. I don't care anything about it besides their skill. If we could find, that's the objective pie in the sky, fluffy, ideal goal, right? Because determining who's the best is already subjective to a degree to begin with. And then there's economic and geographical and political realities that make that much harder to figure out. That's where I come from on a philosophical standpoint. But even more than that, what I care about is that the audience is engaged. Even more than about the meritocracy for the players, I care about the audience being engaged. That to me is priority number fucking one. Because if the audience and the community and the people don't care, then the players don't eat, period. So to me, if we do not solve the problem of getting people to care about any of this, what's the fucking point? So it's still from a perspective I want the players to be rewarded for their efforts. That is always what I care about. In my opinion, while World Warrior served to give players the chance to compete, it alone is not enough. It alone is not enough in its current form. It needs to improve in terms of coverage, promoting the players, and we need to still have offline tournaments. It needs to exist. It needs to exist. Now, they need to find a way to make it more accessible. They need to improve the event distribution. But we need to know what's going on the whole year. Capcom Cup 11 was an amazing show, despite the fact that the offline tour was hurt. We saw what happened when we go to the other extreme. Capcom Cup 11, I think, or 10 rather, was just not it. I think a big part of that also was just the event and the venue, and Capcom Cup 10 stunk compared to this one. And I think they proved that Capcom Cup itself can be good, especially if it's hosted in Japan, where the audience cares and you can feel that the energy is there. I think our big premier events are doing fine. Evo, Capcom Cup. I'm worried about in between. We're losing the incentives and we're losing the connection to our offline major tournament scenes, and players are not being incentivized to travel. Obviously, there's economic issues across the world right now. There's other factors that are greatly impacting this for sure. I'm happy that we have some kind of point system back. Absolutely. We need a balance of World Warrior. We need a balance of the offline scene, because we need people to be tuned in and to be entertained and care about the players from all over the world. That is the number one thing we need. That is the number one thing we need. Is we need viewers to care. I would definitely hope that they can improve the event distribution. Absolutely. Keep the World Warrior and improve the event distribution, because I think this is a start, but it's obviously they're removing accessibility for certain regions that have been super strong, and now they have less people they can send. That is definitely not good. Now, beyond that, they did talk about the prizing, because if you look at last year's prizing, I love this image from Practical Tasks, how Capcom Cup 11 prizing was distributed. Terrible. This is awful. Really awful. 1 million to Kakadu, 100,000 to second place, and third and fourth, and just trickles down like crazy. And last year, second place got 300,000, I believe, and then I think third got 200,000, fourth got 100,000. There was a much more even distribution of the prizing. I think for CPT 2024, they had less funding overall, but they wanted to keep the $1 million headline. Now, this sucks, and this is not healthy for the competitive scene, but it does make for a good headline. So, hey, whatever. Hats off to you. However, the wording for this year's Capcom Pro Tour is a bit different. They say that instead of it being a $1 million tournament, they say the Capcom Pro Tour 2025 prize pool of over 2 million. So they're leaving the wording ambiguous here. And I think it's ambiguous because they're referencing the total funding that they're providing over all the different events. And Inkross here, he shows how the pop bonuses will be 5.2K given to Combo Breaker, CEO, Blink Respawn, and UFA. No pop bonuses to any of the 3 EVOs or CPT Premier, which is weird. I mean, I guess the Premier is in China, so maybe there's issues there. But strange that maybe there's going to be EVO prizing this year. I don't know. But 5.2K of pop bonuses, which is not much. Like, even in the Street Fighter V era pre-COVID, do they mention this pricing split here? In the Street Fighter V era pre-COVID, they gave, I think, at least 7,500 for the winner. But so there's less money for the premieres in the Street Fighter V era, but it's still there. But it's not much. You win combo break here, you get a couple $1,000s extra. It's still something, which is nice. Now, I don't want to sound like it's insignificant. It is something, but it's still very low. But what I'm getting at is I think the language is purposely ambiguous because they might be shifting away from doing $1 million for first place. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't think there's anything confirming that or not. But I really strongly feel that doing the $1 million for first really just kind of making it so top heavy that the other placements don't impact the players' lives, I think that's doing a disservice to the community, and I don't think it's healthy for the competitive scene. So maybe they're going to try to shift their branding to an X, Y, or Z dollar tournament, the $1 million tournament, which I still think has a ring to it. The prize pool has X amount of dollars, $1 million. That's still valuable. Also, I think I didn't go more into the format. I do want to talk about the fact that Esports World Cup is part of the qualification. So Street Fighter League being part of the qualification, I think is kind of weird. They're trying to shoehorn that in. Fine, whatever. Esports World Cup, though, that's pretty interesting to me because, I mean, Esports World Cup has its own issues, but they announced over Capcom Cup weekend as well that they're going to have a bunch of qualifiers. And Esports World Cup qualifications are always funny to me because I think they're just making shit up as they go always. So they're going to have Shanghai return, and then 8 Capcom Cup 11 finalists. So the top 8 automatically gets into Esports World Cup. 12 Capcom Cup Street Fighter League champions. So all of the champions from USA, EU, and Japan get in, which is also why they had to do a random tournament where NL ended up qualifying, because in the top 8, the only person from Street Fighter League was Angry Bird. So there was one spot that was removed from Capcom Cup 11, like he was in both. So that means the players in 9th, the 4 players tied for Cien, NL, I think Takamura, and Fudo had to play a small mini tournament, and NL ended up winning that. They did that in the back break room of Capcom Cup, and NL won, so he earned off stream an Esports World Cup qualification. Then they're just throwing shit at the wall for all these events. 2 for Evo Japan, 2 for Asian Championships League, 1 for Brussels Challenge, 2 for Combo Breaker, 2 for Blink Respawn, top 2 for CEO, 1 for the Saudi E-League Fighting, 1 for the Mix-Up, 1 for BAM Australia, 1 for GCC, which I think is another Saudi tournament, 2 for Evo USA, and then 10 for the Esports World Cup Last Chance Qualifier, which is fucking what? You could have thrown more at Evo. 10 is a random number, again, because normally, like I said, you're going to have a top 8, which makes sense, and then you're going to have another 4 placers tying for 9th. So you're going to have 12 people. You're going to do another mini tournament with the top 9 placers. How does this work? And I think they're just doing that. You know, at first I thought this was super strange and just bad organization. I got to remember the objective of Esports World Cup. It's sports watching, right? They're trying to just make Saudi a thing. So it's just meant to get people into Saudi Arabia, Riyadh. I don't think it has anything to do with being bad at organizing. The main goal is to get people into Saudi and to travel there. So I think them prioritizing having such a weird number for an LCQ is just to get people in the door. And then look how amazing this is. Oh, you had a great time, right? That's all. That's the goal for this. I was hoping here at least more people from other regions would be able to potentially qualify to Capcom Cup through this. But you know, they gave a bit more accessibility to Blink Respawn. So if, you know, like say someone can get to the DR from South America, it might be more feasible. They have more chance to get into then Esports World Cup, and then, you know, it does expand the pool of players that could potentially make it into Capcom Cup a little bit. So that's one positive, but not by much. A lot of these are repeat CPT events, but there's some like in Australia, some in different parts of Europe, but nothing really in South America. I was kind of hoping that maybe Esports World Cup would expand there. That's not the case. And you can see here all the players who are already qualified into Esports World Cup. Interesting cast of characters. I don't know why all of Street Fighter League Worlds are in there, but I mean, shout outs to Team USA. I mean, you got Pong, Christie, CH, Psycho, and Shine already in there, so good for them. I guess I ain't gonna hate. They can keep it. But anyways, that's the announcement. I think this is an improvement. I do think it's unfortunate that they are limiting spots to regions, especially like South America, who just put on such a big show. Not just Blas, but also Salvatore, Zengi Pilato, Juninho Ross, I think Limestone. I think a lot of the South American players really put up big numbers on the board this Capcom Cup. So that's very unfortunate. And obviously there's still places in the world like North Africa with strong players that don't have access. I think that should be solved via expanding the World Warrior, but also expanding the offline circuit. I think that should be a huge priority, is expanding where we have these events and making them more accessible, or building more intermediate roads for these players, building an online qualifiers to then handle the visa process for the players, handle the travel costs for them, more roads to get these players exposure from all over the world, build that up, build up that infrastructure. I really hope they can keep investing in that, because we need to see the players compete face to face. If all we have at the end of a year is World Warrior region locked online tournament qualifiers where we don't ever see the opponent's face, we don't ever see the players, we don't know the stories leading up to it, that is going to eventually lead to the death of the offline scene, and people are just going to be less interested, I think, in the year-long event. I think Capcom Cup and maybe it'll be more and more centralized with Evo and Capcom Cup. That is my concern, is that if this goes on for too long without supporting the offline tournaments, all we have are Evo and Capcom Cup, and everything in between just becomes region-locked offline tournaments. I want the intra-tournaments throughout the season to be more supported, and I think this is a step in the right direction. Not perfect, but I'm happy to see this. I hope they keep improving it.